in Spring and the Farewell are the focus of this video, where we'll go through an analysis of these two final movements of Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. Hi, I'm Gianmaria Griglio, I'm a conductor and a composer, and welcome to this episode of Conducting Pills, a series where we help you discover and dive deeper into a classical piece or a part of it, taking a look at its structure and phrasing, and occasionally at its text. I want to take a second to thank all of my patrons and to remind you that on my Patreon page you can find all the full episodes of Conducting Pills and the extra episodes tackling technical aspects on top of the live sessions and many other patrons' perks. And now, let's begin. The fifth movement of Das Lied von der Erde, the Drunken Man in Spring, starts shifting the focus back on the speaker. We've seen in the previous episodes how Mahler addressed the different emotions of the speaker through different narratives. In this movement, he moves the attention back to the inner self, preparing the audience for the last movement. This movement opens with the horns again, just like the first one. The opening line clearly symbolizes the birds anticipating the middle portion of the text. Even though we start in A major, the atmosphere is not quite jolly as it may seem. The constant key change, along with the partial usage of the pentatonic scale, gives it a flavor of instability. The tenor's entrance has all the contours of a drunken line. It's pesante, heavy, dragging its feet in a ritardando before snapping in tempo. The erratic movements of the music perfectly describe the text.
Wenn nur ein Traum das Leben ist.
The second stanza mirrors the first, starting with the opening theme. And when I can drink no longer, as throat and soul are full, then I stagger to my door and sleep wonderfully.
Und wenn ich nicht mehr trinken kann.
We're back once again to the opening theme, but it is now time for the birds to appear in the narrative. They've been in the background this whole time, in the trilled figures of the woodwinds. The mood is slightly changing, the orchestration is lighter, we see the entrance of a violin solo, the dynamic is dropped to piano, and the singer's line bears the marking zart, delicate. The speaker is now talking directly to a bird, directly to nature. What do I hear when I wake? Listen, a bird sings in the tree. On the word listen, the tempo slows down, forcing the audience to pay attention. And when the speaker finally tells us that it is a bird, the music transforms into the sweetest line. In passages like these, you can really see how much solace Mahler was finding in nature. The music material is always the same, but the perspective through which it's seen is different. We went from the heaviness of a drunk walk to the impalpable airiness of a dream. The piccolo, accompanied by the harp, leaves room to the solo violin, while the tenor is asked to sing pianissimo in a very difficult part of his vocal range. I ask him if the spring is here. I feel as if I were dreaming. The opening material is back once again, and once again filtered through a different perspective. It's still lighter as we hear the answer of the bird, confirming that spring did, in fact, come overnight. Even though it's in a major key, that spring is here, it came overnight, carries an enormous amount of sadness. The bird sings and laughs, and on this note, the speaker decides to go back to drink. Again, same musical material seen in a different light. If anything, this movement shows us to which impressive extent Mahler could morph the same music in a kaleidoscope of emotions. At this point, the euphoria of the alcohol kicks in completely. The opening theme is surrounded by woodwinds runs, harp glissandos, pizzicato on a harmonic in the high register of the violas, tremolos in fortepiano of the first violins. Everything in the orchestration contributes organically to describe that chaos through which the speaker's mind is going through. All of this to reach the conclusion that spring in the end does not matter and he just wants to be drunk.
Und wenn ich nicht mehr singen kann,
And when I can sing no longer, then I go back to sleep. For what does spring matters to me? Let me be drunk. He turned the manuscript over to me to study. When I brought it back to him, almost unable to utter a word, he turned to the Abschied and said, "What do you think? Is this to be endured at all? Will not people make away with themselves after hearing it?" With these words, Brunewald recalls his first encounter with Mahler's Das Lied, and particularly with its final movement, the farewell. Mahler combined two poems here. The first one is set on a mountain where the speaker is waiting for a friend, and the second one is a description of a conversation between two friends discussing about withdrawing into nature. The eternal, almost obsessive presence of nature represents Mahler's ultimate refuge from the suffering of life, the desire to abandon the material world and to transcend both life and death. This final movement, which is almost as long as the previous five put together, is divided in three sections. In the first section, the speaker describes nature at nightfall. In the second, the speaker waits for a friend in order to bid farewell. After a long orchestral interlude, the third section sees the actual farewell taking place and fades into silence. The Abschied begins in a heavy C minor. The sound is at the bottom of the orchestral register with the darkest color built on the contrabassoon, the cellos and basses, the harp, and two horns with an extra funeral tone is provided by the tam-tam. To make sure that we don't even get a glimpse of a clearer sound, Mahler makes sure to put a note indicating that if the double basses do not have the fifth string and thus cannot play the low C, they should pause and not play an octave higher. This is something that, by the way, he had done in the past already, for instance, in his second symphony. An obsessive motive arises in the oboe while the first and second horn answer with the sforzato chords, completing the harmony. The introduction remains grounded on the C pedal. Even though the line tries to escape, it is forced back down to C. Notice the descending figure, a lament in topos of classical music, which we will find later on. The entrance of the speaker, the alto baritone, is not different. The cello, always piano, maintains the pedal. The flute counterpoints the line with the material we've heard in the introduction, and the speaker sings, as Mahler requests, in a narrative tone without expression. The sun goes down on the last scale of the flute and moon rises in the following phrase. The orchestra introduces it with the lamenting figure and the obsessive motive combined. But the lamenting figure takes over, becoming more and more predominant. Oh look, like a silver boat sails the moon in the watery blue heaven. It dominates throughout the whole phrase till the very end of it, when the obsessive motive reuses the accelerando of the introduction. Only for a couple of bars and we're stuck again. The words describe a fine breeze stirring behind the dark pines, and the music moves from C to G incessantly. The following stanza opens in F major with the rocking figure of triplets we've seen already in the second movement, representing the flowing of the brook depicted in the poem. The oboe anticipates the singer's line, introducing it with the familiar motive. Notice how the line almost sounds erratic, without a specific direction. The harp and clarinet are replaced by the violas in the last part of the introduction, where the oboe keeps wandering around. The first phrase is quite serene, with the flute counterlining the singer. The brook sings out clear through the darkness, the flowers pale into twilight. And then we have something totally unexpected. A small orchestral parenthesis verging into the dramatic in contrast with what we've just heard. Perhaps the speaker is being pulled to reality, perhaps it is just a dream being shattered. The will to move away from this is stronger, and from one moment to another we move from the abyss to the comforting rocking mood. Everything seems right again. Weary men traipse homeward to sleep, forgotten happiness and youth to rediscover. The birds are anticipated by the obsessive motive played by the horn. There's a pedal of A that starts almost unnoticeably 3 bars before number 20. This pedal carries us all the way to the next singer's entrance with a new stanza and then keeps going. It's another cadenza-like moment between the singer and the flute. It blows coolly in the shadows of my pines. I stand here and wait for my friend. I wait to bid him a last farewell. What follows at number 23 is notoriously one of the most difficult passages to conduct. It needs a lot of push and pull while respecting the constantly changing inner rhythms. All of this to describe the emotional status of the speaker yearning to enjoy this beautiful evening with the friend who has yet to arrive. And notice the presence of the mandolin posing for the lute mentioned later in the poem. I yearn, my friend, at your side to enjoy the beauty of this evening. The wait is becoming unnerving. Where are you? You leave me long alone. Mahler, the speaker, finds comfort once more in nature. A praise to this beautiful world lifts up the mood, but inevitably sinks back into the opening motive. The final farewell is about to begin. The darkness of the opening returns with double basses now playing divisi. The lines are more troubled, looking and surging into each other for a way out. Look at 4 bars before number 40, for example. On top of the C pedal, the weeping figures of the clarinets and violas, the cello solo wanders insistently around the same notes. The journey continues on 41 with the weeping motive turning into an accompaniment, while an extended version of the same figure moves around different sections. Everything is moving and yet everything remains still. Time is expanding to the point of imperceptible pacing. We're constantly moving from piano to forte in a spasm of contrasting emotions pulling each other only to return to the same place. At number 45 we start seeing a crescendo both in dynamic and orchestration. The weeping figure is extended all throughout number 46 and desperately lands in the same abyss once more. And Mahler keeps digging and digging and digging until he reaches the bottom with cellos and double basses on their lowest note. The interlude ends and we're taken into the final stanza. Once again, the singer declamates the text on a C pedal. There's no room this time for any other instrument to counterline, only a tam-tam in pianissimo, darkening the color. Another orchestral parenthesis separates us from the next entrance. 2 words. He spoke. A toneless singer in silence. We're back to a rocking rhythm. The comfort of nature is not far. The obsessive motive is now played by the first violins and the flute in a luminous F major. The phrase keeps going in the same key, and we expect to end on it, but Mahler isn't quite finished. The resolution is postponed, and the phrase lands on the 7th chord on F sharp, 4 bars before number 57. I'll never wander far, still is my heart awaiting its hour. We're left in the limbo on these words until consolation comes from the earth itself, blossoming and growing everywhere. Everything is pianissimo. Mahler even asks specifically for no crescendo. The line is flowing somewhere above our world. Nature is lifting us and liberating our heavy hearts. There is still some tension left in the triplets against the quadruplets. After all, we're still humans and struggle to understand how our quest for peace can finally come to an end. But everywhere and forever, blue is the horizon. The celesta adds a final touch of ethereal sound around 62 and following, and we're left with the word forever repeated a number of times while we finally find our much longed for peace. This was quite a journey, as it is Das Lied von der Erde, a journey in our inner and outer selves, looking for some answers to our tormented lives. Answers we won't ever be able to find. We can only surrender and hope to find some rest before our 100 years are over. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button right below the video and ring the bell so we will get notified every time a new video comes out. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can do so on my Patreon page, and if you're interested in conducting technique, follow my Facebook group. All the links are in the description. Let me know in the comments what you think about this piece, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, and I look forward to seeing you next week with a new episode of Conducting Pills when we will go through Schubert's Symphony No. 5. In the meanwhile, please continue to enjoy music and be well. Ciao! When the music gets faster, your gestures need to get smaller, especially with a big orchestra. Otherwise, you'll...